Hi, I'm Chuck Zech, professor of economics at Villanova University. You know, Catholics contribute less in financial support to their parishes than do members of nearly every other U.S. church. This pattern was first discovered by Andrew Greeley in his path-breaking study of religious giving in the 1980s. Has been confirmed by every researcher since that time. In fact, the rule of thumb is that the typical Catholic household contributes about half as much of their income as of the typical Protestant household. Catholics, on the average, contribute a bit more than 1% of their income, while Protestants contribute slightly more than 2%. What does this mean? It means that if the typical Catholic household just contributed the same rate as their Protestant friends, I'm not talking about tithing, just the same 2% of their income as their Protestant friends, the U.S. Catholic Church will raise another $7 billion in revenue each year. To put it a different way, an average-sized parish would generate another $400,000 in revenue. What could the U.S. Catholic Church do with another $7 billion a year? What could the typical parish do with another $400,000 a year? So how can we increase Catholic giving? Study after study has shown that Catholics are receptive to the stewardship message. When they recognize that all they have is a gift from God, when they develop a need to give rather than merely give to a need, when they learn that stewardship is not about something they do, it's about who they are and whose they are, they become more willing to contribute their time, talent, and treasure. But stewardship doesn't occur in a vacuum. Researchers have found that in order for a parishioner to be receptive to the stewardship message, other factors must be in place. These include believing that they have an input into church decision-making processes and believing that the church is accountable and transparent with its finances. Catholics who believe that they have an input into church decision-making processes at both the parish and diocesan levels, and who consider the church to be accountable and transparent with its finances, again at both the parish and diocesan levels, contribute more. So what does the record show? In a study that I performed with Dean Hoagie, Patrick McNamara, and Michael Donahue in the early 1990s, we found that among regular Mass-attending Catholics, only about 50% of the parishioners felt they had enough information about parish finances or had sufficient input into parish decision-making processes. The comparable figure for Protestants hovered around 75%. At the diocesan level, again, fewer than half of the parishioners felt they had sufficient influence in decision-making processes. Among Protestants, more than 2/3 were satisfied with their input in adjudicatory decision-making. More recently, in a study that was funded by Fatica, we found that, again, among regular Mass-attending Catholics, only slightly more than 50% thought they had an adequate understanding of how church contributions are used, and fewer than half thought that church leaders were competent in the handling of money. The number of parishioners who felt that the bishops were accountable on church finances decreased from 44% in 2002 to 38% in 2003, while the proportion who thought the church needs to be more accountable on finances increased from 65% in 2002 to 75% in 2003. Financial transparency and accountability, along with lay input into church decision-making, are not only critical governance issues, they impact directly on church finances. Let's turn now to the expenditure side. Even if the clergy sexual abuse scandal, with all its financial implications, hadn't occurred, the U.S. Catholic Church was facing a serious financial crisis on the expenditure side in the next decade. Some of the causes are directly related to the decline in religious vocations. First, there are the exploding labor costs inherent in the use of lay ministers. Just as the decline in vocation among women religious has caused our parochial schools to hire more lay teachers, so too the decline in vocation to the priesthood has resulted in many parishes dramatically increasing their lay staff. This might have occurred anyway, with the realization by the laity through the teachings of Vatican II that through their baptism they share in the church's priesthood and have both the right and the responsibility to be involved in church administration. Whatever the cause, the church now depends on an ever-increasing core of lay ecclesial ministers who demand and deserve a just wage and appropriate fringe benefits. Second is the underfunded deferred maintenance problem, which I've referred to elsewhere as a ticking time bomb. To my knowledge, no one knows the full extent of the cost of this problem. Evidence is anecdotal. For example, I can think of a recent news article concerning the closing of parishes in Boston. One cluster of 7 parishes estimated that combined they had over $15 million in deferred maintenance, just to bring them up to code. I believe this problem is widespread, yet there seems to be little concerted effort to deal with it. Related to both the decline in religious vocations and the underfunded deferred maintenance, along with geographical shifts in Catholic population, is the closing and opening of parish facilities. Fewer and aging priests, combined with deteriorating church facilities, combined with population shifts, have caused nearly every diocese to consider and act on closing or restructuring the staffing of their parishes. Staffing restructuring can be very disruptive to parish life. Again, the question of lay involvement in the decision-making process emerges. In a recent nationwide poll of parish pastoral council members in parishes that had been restructured, only slightly more than half felt that the laity had sufficient input into the decision. Finally, population movements from the inner city to the suburbs, from the suburbs to exurbia, and from the north and east to the west and south are in many places putting a strain on parish facilities in these growing regions. This calls for the building and financing of new facilities, including both churches and schools. Along with problems on the revenue side, the U.S. Catholic Church faces tremendous challenges on the expenditure side, both in human resource costs and in facilities costs.